Unlimited edition.
Welcome back to another episode of the Black Sheep Podcast. I'm your host, Toshiba Smallwood. And if you haven't had an opportunity to go check us out on all our social media platforms, be sure to go give us a like, comment, or even subscribe to all our social media platforms. And if you also would like the Black Sheep to come to a city near you, or if you would like to come share your story on the Black Sheep Podcast, be sure to DM us or email us at theblacksheep@gmail.com. We are back this week with a very special guest this week. I have the beautiful Miss Dr. Blackman here with us. She's a clinical psychologist, guys. She's going to come in here and talk to us a little bit about um, what it's like from her side of dealing with clients that and how important it is to deal with our trauma. She's locally known in the DFW area. However, she is known from the Boots, the New Orleans. I hope I said that right for you, New Orleans people. The New Orleans, right? Did I get that right? Did I get that right? Okay. So she's from New Orleans, guys. Um, she does incredible work here in the DFW, well respected. And I'm excited to have her on today to just kind of talk about some of the things from her perspective when it's concerning and dealing with trauma. So, how are you, Miss Shimmy?
I'm doing very well. I'm happy to be in this new year. I'm happy to have earned my degree just recently. I've been doing therapy for about 6 years now, but I just recently, earned my doctorate. I'm doing very well. I'm happy to be here.
Good. We're happy to have you. I tell people all the time how important it is to have a therapist. And I know there's a difference between a psychologist and a therapist and all those great things, but just how important it is to have a relationship with someone that you can count on to talk you through your trauma, to help jumpstart your healing process because we all need healing, guys. And that's very important. What you think?
I think it's very important. I think mental health is definitely stigmatized in the Black community.
Yes.
There's many different avenues through which you can become a therapist. And so clinical psychologists can actually be therapists too, but not all clinical psychologists are therapists. But then you also have like licensed professional counselors who, that is their bread and butter. They do therapy. So therapy is very important for a multitude of things, especially trauma. It's important to see a therapist, to talk to somebody about what you're experiencing, or to seek peer support, which
Right.
is, what you do.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And that's what Black Sheep is about, guys. It's just creating a safe place where we can have someone that we can count on um, to talk to about the things that we've been through. I'm such a relatable person because I've been through so much, guys. And you guys are going to start hearing a lot more about the official Black Sheep, me, myself, and I, and just some of the things that I've been through and why I take to being a Black Sheep and why it's so important to me. So I'm gonna call you Miss Blackman today, even though she's my friend, guys. However, Miss Blackman, why is it important? Why do you feel like your clients or just people in general, and I know a lot of times we, like you said, our community have a stigma um, when it comes to talking about the things that we've been through. We don't like to talk about it.
Yeah.
So why is that? Why do we decide to silence ourselves? Why do we choose that route?
So when you ask me that question, there's really a twofold answer.
Okay.
Yeah. So first, there's the the stigmatization of mental health in the Black community in general. There's a number of reasons, just for that. A lot of times Black people don't want to be seen as crazy. Mental health therapy is thought of as something that it belongs to, white people or more affluent people. Black people are thinking that they have to be strong,
Yeah.
and if they're seeking help, then that makes them weak. And then there's this other kind of type of thinking that exists in the Black community where what happens in our home stays in our home.
Yes.
And, we're not supposed to be going out and talking about these things.
Right.
And a lot of that has to do with, our parents not wanting to really address the issues that they're having.
Mhm.
And, that just trickles down from generation to generation.
Right.
So that's one point. And then the second point is when you're dealing with trauma, especially with abuses.
Mhm.
So there's so many different types of trauma, right?
Say that.
So,
Say that.
you can be in a car accident. That can be considered a trauma. You can give birth, and that could be a traumatic experience. But when there's abuse involved, that specifically has to do with another person who is having power over you in those moments. And so there's a lot of reasons why people don't seek help and don't want to talk about that. A lot of times there's shame involved
Mhm.
and guilt involved with that. And then an additional reason is just because you don't want to bring a bad light on your family. This is you as an adult, more than likely. You don't want to bring a bad light on your family. There's more reasons than that, but I just wanted to ask your questions around about why people kind of stay silent, especially when they've experienced trauma. There's more reasons,
Right.
but
Right. And hearing, I mean, you just said a mouthful of all the things that I just can't stand, right? And the family name, the family image, and we're not wanting people to come against the family name. We put up this persona thinking that, the glitz and glory of things. We also have being called crazy,
Yeah.
when you're telling your truth. And I talked about this in the episode before, like the victim shaming of it all.
Yeah.
We don't want to, we're afraid of that, because, depending on who we're coming up against, we have so much anxiety and fear from them that we decide to just take that silent route and then and take the bullets, take the gut punches from it all. And for myself, I just know what that feels like, being being looked at like, yeah, I'm the one that's crazy, and I was the one that yet had my right mind, but because at the time, depending on what time this is going on with you, as a child, the parents go, oh, she nice.
Yeah.
And it happened.
Yeah.
And that does nothing but just make it worse, and it's more hurtful, right?
Yes.
And I don't think that you said one thing that was so significant, and I try to teach my clients this as well, is when we deal with our trauma and the things that we go through, understanding that if our trauma comes from the abuse of someone else, we have to understand that they may have not dealt with their own trauma, because trauma shows up in our lives, right? If we don't deal with it, it begins to be our beliefs, the things we believe because of what we've been through, the way we carry ourselves, the way we react to things because of things that we've been through. And so I try to tell them, like, instead of counting that person completely out, we have to hold them accountable to their actions.
Yes.
But we have to also be a little sympathetic to the fact that they probably went through some trauma too, and that's why they act or react the way they've been through. It's like hurt people hurt people. You know what I'm saying? So I think that this is why this is needed, and it's good because we have to find a different way to be comfortable with psychologists and therapists and things of that nature, to find new ways to cope. What does that look like? Give them some examples where they won't feel so stigmatized behind talking to a therapist or a psychologist.
So how won't people feel ashamed about coming to therapy, or how do they kind of let go of that thing that's in between them and actually seeking help?
Yes.
Just to do it. People, I think that, seeking help is one of those behaviors that you have to figure out how to challenge yourself. Um, You just have to go. You just have to go to therapy. You have to go and experience what that's like. Whenever we haven't experienced something before, there's always some fear there. Some underlying fear. And so it's just an anxiety that you can only get through if you have the experience. And a lot of times people don't seek help is because they don't know if that therapist is going to be understanding of them. They don't know if they're just going to be laying down on a couch like something that they've seen on TV where they just talk and the person just sits there and says,
doodling notes.
And then you go home. They don't know how it's going to be helpful.
Right.
And so the first step is to actually introduce yourself to therapy. Look it up. Look up what type of like treatment modalities there are because there's different types of ways that you can do therapy with a client. And so just do some of that research and then do it to see if, that therapist will be a good fit for you
Yes.
and to learn more about what you can get from it.
Right.
So I would say that's how. And then to encourage your friends, like encourage people who are seeing therapists. There's a lot of Black people who are seeing therapists now. A lot of people are seeing therapists now. I think it's important to encourage others to seek help.
Yes.
And that breaks down the stigma as well. It's not like, oh, I'm weak and I'm crazy. Well, no, a lot of us are going now. So yeah, we all need help.
Yes.
And so that's how we break down that stigma.
And could you tell the listeners some examples of the good that comes out of getting help?
Do we want to talk like specifically about traumas and abuse or just general?
Whatever you want to talk about.
Okay. Let's speak generally first. Generally, what you can get from therapy is personal growth. If you go to therapy just for behavioral changes, like I'm not progressing in my life and there's something I feel like I could be doing better, and somebody has to basically put a mirror in front of my face so that I can see myself better and grow, I think therapy is good in that way.
Yeah.
A therapist can really pinpoint your behavior. A good therapist can really pinpoint your behavior and your behavior patterns and how you interact with others and how you stand still in your life or move forward and can help you grow.
Yeah.
So that's just generally. Mental health wise, I think a therapist can help you to understand what your options are. And again, this just goes back to behavior patterns, helping you to understand better about let's say depression, for example. There's certain times when you probably feel more depressed than normal. What are the things that trigger that depression? What are the situations? How can we cope with that? It helps in terms of learning coping skills. And then some people have depression that is long standing. Like it's not like you remit from the depression and the depressive symptoms. So in those instances, a therapist or a psychologist might be offering to you, what are some medications that I could be taking? So those are a lot of the benefits of going to therapy. Yeah.
And I really encourage people to do your research and do your research on the therapist before you even go. I mean, there's just so many things, so many different therapists out there that you can actually go out there and do research, do a little bit of research behind that person, see if that's a good fit for you. But don't be afraid to get the help. Do the work, get the help, because your life depends on it. And not to mention, you have other people that's depending on you. They're probably depending on you to get the help that you need as well. And so we always bring black sheep out here. You probably don't identify as a black sheep. I've not had that type of deep conversation with you yet. But
For today, I'm here for it.
but being here and we bring out black sheep and we talk about the trauma that we all encounter. It can, like you gave me an example, that it can be different types of trauma that a person can go through. Can you give us a little bit of within reason, a story or examples on how you help clients?
How I help clients. All right. So first I want to say that I have been reflecting on black sheep and, that name. And even though in my family, I wouldn't consider myself a black sheep, I was blessed to be raised in a family where my thoughts and feelings were accepted, but still, there's still like that culture of blackness where, you don't speak about things, and you don't say what happens in this house stays in this house. There was that, but I was able to be myself, and I had a strong self-esteem and self-identity.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I was a black sheep in that way, but I really could identify with the name because I identify with feeling alone in an experience.
Okay.
And feelings about an experience, thoughts about an experience, and not being able to share that.
Okay.
Right. So I can definitely associate, with black sheep, what it stands for. But what was the second question?
I can't even remember the second question because that was a great answer, but I will give you another question. How did dealing with traumatic experiences, how do you feel like that affect personal relationships?
Oh, that's a great question. If you have not learned how a traumatic experience has affected you, it definitely, like, it comes up in basically all of your relationships. It can pop up. So, traumatic experiences, especially, where there's abuses, where someone holds power over you, or, you are something happens to you that you may not have want to happen, that affects how you look at the world and how you see people. So in that way, you become afraid. Like, you go to an extreme in terms of your thoughts about the world. So I'm gonna give a specific example. If you're sexually abused, you may have an extreme fear of men. And so, in your interactions with men, you may not trust them. And so there's this like trust component. And then, so every time that you interact with men, there's going to be a trust component that causes you to break down in that relationship.
Like a trigger.
Yeah, it's going to be a trigger. So it affects relationships in that way. Like, how do you then engage in a romantic relationship? That's if you're cisgendered.
Yeah. Sexual preference.
Yeah, if that's your sexual preference, like, how do you engage in that relationship then? But even so, even if you're not cisgendered, even if you are lesbian, or it doesn't matter what, homosexual, whatever the case is, you are still affected in that relationship as well.
Right.
Because you might have triggers about being touched. You might still have triggers about people being emotionally close to you. Is it something that they're going to get from me? Are they going to take advantage of me? It affects your relationships in that way. And then there's like other traumatic experiences too. It's not just sexual abuse. Like, when you experience a lot of community violence, for example, you might go out into the world and it's always somebody's trying to do something to me, get over on me. I have to fight. I have to be aggressive. And in that way, it affects your relationships. Like, somebody might be not meaning to harm you at all, but here you are attacking them all the time. So yeah, trauma affects you in those ways, and therapy can help because it helps you to, number one, recognize those patterns and those thoughts, recognize situations where you're safe and unsafe, because there are situations where you're not safe. That's the reality of the world we live in. But it helps you to recognize those things and then kind of counteract that, cope with some of your anxieties, and then deal with it.
Yeah. And listen to something that I was almost about to say, girl, are you a therapist? She always all up in my business right there.
I was in your face just then. Yeah.
I was like, hold
That's why people be like, would you be? I'm like, no, we're friends.
on. I thought she,
Because then all of a sudden I'm too close. And you like back up.
but a piece of that.
Yeah.
You're so right. Right. Going down the road and just listen to what you're saying. I had a significant amount. I did experience sexual abuse. And it's from many levels. Right.
1 in 4 girls experience sexual abuse in some way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand the being in a place where I don't trust men. Um, I have a male. I call him my brother, Mr. Steve. I know he watches. He's such a big supporter, but he kind of changed the trajectory of the way I looked at men. Because I didn't even really like trust really the men in my family. Because it was some of the closest men that were coming for me too, right? That were in my family. You know?
Normally, the people who sexual abuse others are closest to them in
Right.
relationship.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I understand what that feels like from that standpoint. And then just not knowing how to love properly, not knowing how to receive love properly, was a significant struggle for me. And if I just be transparent, because I try to encourage everyone out here to be transparent as well, that was a struggle for me. That was a struggle for me, and it kind of left me in a place I really didn't want love. Like I really didn't. I didn't want people to get that close to me from a romantic standpoint.
Yeah.
So, and if I be completely transparent, um, I became the manipulator. Some people won't admit that. Some people won't really admit that, but I did. What do I mean by that? I became someone who um just was out here seeking what I could, because I felt like that's what those people did to me. They just seeked what they could take from me, right? I wasn't taking nothing from nobody, but
In that way, you were in control.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, because I didn't have control when at the time that these things happened to me. This was my way of trying to have control and gain control, and so I became very controlling in a lot of ways in my life that I had to openly admit and change my behavior and embrace different things because that's not that I knew that's not who I wanted to be. But I felt like that was the safest place for me. Right. So it's that wall, putting up that facade like, I don't want nobody to get close to me, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
And we refuse to deal with the trauma. So then I began to deal with that because I started to see what it was doing around me. Right.
Yeah.
So that's why, and I truly believe in the whole therapy aspect of everything. It's very important to me to have my relationship with my therapist on a regular basis. On a regular basis. Even when I do this black sheep stuff, I have to have certain boundaries for myself. If I be completely transparent, so that I can continue to do the work that's needed, right, and not allow it to overflow my cup or allow my experiences to overflow in someone else's cup because I've been through it. You know what I'm saying? So it's very important, guys, that we have that relationship with a therapist and we seek it. I do talk on here also on Black Sheep about having a relationship with a God that you serve. And that's an important tool also for my soul. That's helped me through my journey a significant amount. Ms. Blackman, tell me your spiritual journey and how that has helped you through the success of your career, and getting your doctorate and all those things.
So I'm not a religious person, so to speak, but I do believe in God. I am a spiritual person, and I will say that, I've had very challenging times, like through my doctoral experience, through my education, and it has made me question uh, the higher power, I can say. But because of my spiritual foundation, I'm also aware that, there's things that we go through that we need to learn from. And it might not be apparent. It might actually seem like, you've been forsaken in some instances, especially like just to take the light off myself for just a moment and think about the clients that I see who have experienced sexual abuse, a lot of times, people have very strong religious backgrounds. And when they come in, they are wondering how God could have allowed this to happen to them and what that's about. And it actually, in terms of trauma, sometimes you have worse symptoms when people really do believe in God because of how we're taught about God and how we're taught about Jesus and everything like that. All good and all well being. Well, how could this have happened to me? But I do think that there's something that we can learn from our experiences and that our challenges, if we can get through them, make us stronger.
Mhm.
And I think that it puts us sometimes in positions to help others.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
How would you encourage a young person that's seeking for some type of spiritual journey that would help them along their traumatic experience? How would you encourage them to find that spiritual walk for themselves? Because there's so many what we call religions out there, and I don't get into a dogfight about what God people
Yeah.
right. As long as your God tell you to do the right thing, I'm here for it. I know that I always tell people now. I know the God I serve. Now, if you want a little bit of Him, I can show you how to do that. But how would you encourage a young person that's looking for some type of guidance on a spiritual walk?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to that.
You know,
Yeah, I don't know. I know that I would encourage somebody to. I know who I wouldn't tell them to seek. Don't seek out somebody who tells you just to pray it all away, because we can't always pray things away. We have to get help from people with experience in areas that not all people have experience with. So that's one thing. Mental health issues and trauma, all of that's real. And even though prayer about it, prayer to have mental fortitude, prayer to have faith to move forward, prayer to see us through the hardship, that's very important. But we also need help. So, yeah, that's what I would say to them.
what I would encourage a young person to do, if my God isn't relatable for you, it's just the same thing we say about therapists. Do your research.
Yeah.
There's so many different religions out here that you just would have to do your research. But I would just encourage to have a higher power to be connected to that would influence and promote good and to do the right thing. Because it's important as well to have. Um, and I had another question for you concerning trauma. Um, when it comes to dealing with someone from a close level, maybe from a family member, um, they don't want to address the trauma that they've caused someone. And how do you tell your client to deal with it? How do you encourage them to get through that? Because the person who's caused the trauma don't want to address it.
That's a great question. I'm thinking the reason why I'm paused is because I'm thinking about if I've had a client who has dealt with that.
Because a lot of times, guys, we realize that when we talk about our intimate family, that a lot of times they're our closest people hurt us, right? And they don't want to admit that it happened.
Yeah.
They don't want to say that, obviously they don't want to say sorry, being apologetic to what happened between that experience. They want to acknowledge or be accountable to it.
Yeah.
And so you find yourself sometimes enraged
Yeah.
and frustration because you feel like, why you keep denying that this actually happened to me?
Right.
This happened to me.
Right.
And I tell people all the time when it comes to trauma, uh, when you encounter trauma or any type of traumatic experience, forget it.
Well, no.
You don't forget.
Unless you're a baby.
Huh?
Unless you're a baby.
Yeah. Shoot, sometimes Well, newborn babies, what you talking about?
Yeah, like
Okay, yeah, okay.
infant.
Yeah, infants maybe. Yeah.
Small children. I think that to a client, I would ask, like, how important is that for you and this person's relationship? Because a lot of time as we grow into adults, okay, I'm thinking about adults and children now, but a lot of times as we grow into adults, we can set the parameters around relationships. Sometimes maybe we want to have that relationship with our mother or our father, and it's important to address, here's what you did with me. And you also have to understand that that person, how you have insight and you've come to a place in your life where you're able to talk about things and digest them in a different way, that person has to come and meet you there too. And they might not be ready to meet you there.
Yeah.
But it's still important, I think, to bring it up if you want to have that relationship with that other individual. It's important to talk about that. And where they meet you is where they meet you. Now, can you continue the relationship if they're not able to be accountable in that moment? That's up to you to decide. But then if you're not able to continue that relationship, if that person is not accountable, then you have to lay that out for that person as well. You also have to be aware, I can't avoid this and act like it doesn't exist because it actually is affecting me.
Right.
So am I going to say to them, hey, I've been wanting to have this conversation with you and you're not listening to me? And if you're not able to have this conversation with me, then this is how close we can be, or this is where it stops for us.
Right.
Or, would you be willing to come to therapy with me and have a conversation with a therapist? I think that's another way to do it.
Right.
But you have to meet people where they are. Me personally, I've been in such a situation like with my own father. Like I said, traumatic experiences kind of run the gambit. Um, People have been talking a lot about father wounds, and I can definitely say I have some of those with my father. And it took me calling him to the carpet several times for him to really understand what it was that I was saying to him and really realize, wow, I didn't know that you felt that way.
Yeah.
I'm realizing, and it went from defensiveness. So it started out as defensiveness with him on his end, and then it went to, I'm hearing what you're saying, but no response. Then it went to accountability. So it took time. It took a matter of years. It was years. It was a process. Yeah. It was years, but the relationship was important enough for me to maintain where it was something that I could live my life without him, being accountable in the moment. But I was going to keep saying it.
Yeah.
Whenever it came up for me, I was going to say it. I wasn't going to force the issue, but whenever it came up, I was going to talk about it. And, we are where we are now. So, yeah.
Do you and father have a better relationship?
Yeah.
That's good.
We have a good relationship.
That's good. I love to hear. I love to hear the good on the other side of the story. Be honest with you. One thing I will say is this: even during the process, you have to also understand that during the process, you might not get that type of story.
You might not.
Because depending on the person that you're dealing with, they may not come to a place where they're willing to address it. They may not come to a place where they're willing to be accountable. And so you have to be okay with knowing that you're doing the work. So you're going to continue to grow. You're going to heal, and you're going to overcome the situation. But you're never going to get the sorry or you know what I'm saying, the apologies or the acknowledgement or the Trump. You're never probably going to get that, and that's something that I've had to encounter with my own mother, right? Just not being accountable to the hurtful things. Because for me in my life, and I've encountered um, uh, sexual assaults. However, I feel like my mother is the person who hurt me the most, right? So, with that being said, I have to be okay with she's just never going to. She's never going to be accountable. But anyway, Miss Blackman, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today to kind of give us some insight about being a psychologist and the importance of therapy and things of that nature. Guys, if let us encourage you that if you have not tapped into being able to do that, please do so. Uh, we will put up some resources that Ms. Blackman is familiar with around the DFW area,
For sure.
and some just general numbers that you can reach out to if you need the help. Because there's plenty of help out there, guys, and let's just tap in and start our healing journey. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
out here.
Of
I
course.
appreciate you. And
Of course.
listen, guys, last thing, remember, here on Black Sheep, the things that you don't talk about are the things that we want to talk about. All right? We'll see you next time on Black Sheep. Happy New Year. Be blessed.